yeah, 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 come on. Yeah, 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 come on. They try but they can get rid
Hi
of
guys,
me.
I'm Si. Welcome to Ace Podcast Nation. We're back at E.C.E Media. Big thanks to them as always for hosting us. And I tell you, today for my story, I'm joined by some would say the godfather of Welsh journalism, Mr. Terry Phillips. How are you, my friend?
Not so bad, thank you.
Thank you for coming in. I'm looking forward to having a chat about your career, a long, distinguished career. How long have you been a journalist?
53 years.
Crazy.
If you say I'm still a journalist, because I work for Cardiff
Yeah.
City and Cardiff Devils, so I'm sort of
Still dabbling. Yeah, no, I mean, look, that's a long time by any stretch, isn't it? And I'm sure there's many stories which we won't get to today. But talk to me a bit about the sort of the childhood and the early days of Terry Phillips. Like, what were you like as a kid?
I was born in Rochester in Kent,
Okay.
place where Steve Ovett was born as well. And I grew up playing sport all the time. Then I got a job at the Kent Messenger when I was 17. But sport was my life. I played all the time. I didn't do very well in my exams at school and decided to go to college, and eventually I was offered a job by the Kent Messenger as basically a copy boy running bits of paper around the office. And I was supposed to go to college, but instead I didn't. I went and played sport.
Yeah.
I was playing basketball, things like that. But in the end they kept me on. Somebody left the Kent Messenger and they asked me to stand in for a couple of weeks, and I never went again, never went anywhere else. So yeah, that's how it all started. But I was an only child in many ways. My brother and sister, half brother and sister, are 10 years older than me. So
Okay, so it's a big difference.
big difference. And but it was good growing up. My mother worked for the Chatham Observer.
Okay, so it's in the family.
But she was an editorial assistant. She wasn't
Yeah.
a journalist. And my uncle was the editor of the Chatham Observer. So I had it in my
okay.
blood, maybe. I don't know.
So was that something like journalism and writing? Was that something you were interested in from like an early standpoint?
Apparently we went to Butlins or Pontins or somewhere like that, and I went up on stage as a 5-year-old, and they asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, sports journalist. So that was 5 years old. So I don't remember that, but
No,
that's what they tell me.
I mean, I remember, I must have been about 10 or 11, and it must have been around that. And my dad we'd obviously been talking about like, oh, what do you want to do? My first answer was always, I want to be a footballer. He said, oh, and then we were talking, and we somehow must have got on to like journalists and things like that. And he said, oh, go and probably trying to give me something to do and get me out of his hair in hindsight. But he sort of said, oh, go and get a piece of paper, go and watch I think it was a Chelsea game on TV or something, and just make some notes and that, and then write up a report after it. And I did it, and I did enjoy it. And even after that, I think in the last year of primary school, I wrote like an essay on Andrei Kanchelskis, because he was Ukrainian or whatever, and he just was a player which I really liked. And I was really into like writing and sort of sports journalist, and I thought that was the way I was going to go. Unfortunately, much like my football and my cricket career, I got distracted by girls and other such things when I was sort of 15, in that sort of age where my younger son is now, where you really need to sort of focus in a little bit on the exams and stuff. And I didn't. I just was more interested in going out and stuff. But such is life with hindsight and things like that.
Yes.
So, how did you come to end up in Cardiff then?
Well, I worked at the Kent Messenger. Then I decided to make a move to progress my career. At the time at the Kent Messenger, I was reporting on Gillingham Football Club, which was a great time in journalism because newspapers were the kings.
Absolutely.
And I used to sit with the manager, Andy Nelson. He'd go training, then he'd get in his bath with his fish and chips on his lap, and he'd be eating his chips, and I'd be interviewing him. And he'd tell me every player they were interested in or been watching, because there was nowhere for it to go apart from the newspaper. Yeah. And if I let him down, then that was the end of me. But so that I went from there to the Derby Evening Telegraph next, where I covered Nottingham Forest when Clough was manager. Brian Clough.
He like?
He was tremendous. You'd arrange to meet him, he wouldn't turn up at all. And other times he was absolutely brilliant. You know, he we were in Sweden for a European Championship game, and I was getting from the ground to the airport, and I was hurrying because I needed to get to the airport quickly. And he stopped the team bus, said, "Young man, get on here." And you know,
There you go.
and what else did he do? When I was at, they played Gravesend and Northfleet in a pre-season friendly when they were European Cup holders, and he took the trophy out onto the pitch before the game and was holding it aloft for all the fans and etc. etc. And he brought the trophy over to me and plonked it on the press box desk. Said, "Look after that young man." Nowadays you'd have a team of minders.
Yeah, of course you would. Yeah. That's mad.
But he just left it with me for 45 minutes.
Wow. He much like Fergie and some of those other sort of old school managers, he comes across sometimes in the media, particularly, as quite prickly and a bit abrasive.
He could be.
But actually, like when you hear people talk about them, you really hear like a different side to them, and they're quite warm characters, quite funny. But you don't always see that in there.
He was a complex character. I mean, I used to be a good friend with John McGovern, the captain.
Yeah.
Played squash with him a couple of times a week, and he used to say the players never knew how Brian Clough would be. They could go and win 5-0 somewhere, he'd come in and be really negative, and then they'd get beaten somewhere, and he'd come in and be the opposite. And it's just he said you just didn't know. Maybe that was his secret. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there's probably something to that. If you like, if you know what's coming from the manager, you can almost get a bit comfortable.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a bit not on eggshells, but like if you're not quite sure which way it's going to go, it keeps you on your toes and keeps you working hard and striving for more.
And he always used to turn up in his floppy green sweatshirt, having played squash. Even when they signed Trevor Francis for £1 million, he turned up in his floppy green sweatshirt.
£1 million. That seems like such a long time ago. I remember that, those days in the early days of sort of the £1 million transfers, and I just look back now and I just think, wow, it's like a completely different world.
I go back even further when Jimmy Greaves signed for 99,999 because they didn't want to go to the extra pound. He didn't want to be the first £100,000 footballer. That's gone out of proportion now.
Yes, I think it won't be long before there's a £200 million footballer.
Yeah.
In fact, with that striker from Napoli, and so many clubs needed a striker in the summer, I don't think he'll end up going for far off that because of his age and whatnot. So you covered sort of Forest and Brian Clough, which I'm imagining was must have been quite satisfying to be able to, obviously you do a job which you enjoy.
Yes.
But you're also rubbing shoulders and speaking to these.
Yeah,
really
the players were great.
And
Clough was very open. He'd let his players, talk. So
something which does interest me, and I just thought of it a minute ago now, is obviously as a journalist, you're trying to get stories and stuff like that, and there's stories where you can speak to someone and then you can quote them directly.
Yes, yeah.
But then, of course, there's stories where you might speak to managers, players, whoever, and you can't name them, you can't name your source or whatever. How difficult is it to cultivate those sources and build trust with people that they can speak to you and they know that you're not going to...
That is the key word in my world, which is trust. Without trust, you're nowhere. And the problem, the journalism is split into more than two, but two main bits from newspapers. The national journalists who can hit and run, they can go with a big story and splash, and upset people, which stories sometimes do. With the regional journalists, you have to find a balance because you've probably got to speak to them every day. Malky McKay was fantastic when he was in Cardiff. Other managers have been really good that I've worked with. It's just
one or two. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think with the regional side of it and the regional journalists, like you say, you've got to work with the club to a certain degree, and you're interacting with them every day. So you don't necessarily want to upset them, but sometimes you're going to.
Oh, you're bound to, yeah, absolutely.
And that's just the way of the world, isn't it? I think, like, even like in the world now as it is with podcasts and YouTube channels and things like that, and even TV still is just about clinging on, I think,
Mm.
in this day and age. But like, if you've got people who are being assessing or talking about or analysing a sport, whether it's football or ice hockey or cricket or whatever, is if the players watch or read these articles, or the managers, they're going to get upset at some point, particularly if they don't agree with the assessment or they don't agree with the rating and things like that. So I want to talk to you about a rating, because I was reading about the only 0 rating you ever gave yesterday. But before we get to that, I want to get to sort of how you ended up in sunny Wales.
Well, I went from Derby. I took the job as assistant sports editor at the Gloucester Citizen, which of course is a rugby city. So I was reporting on Gloucester Rugby Club. I went on tour with them to America, Portugal, Holland, all over the place, which was fantastic. Appeared in front of their tour court twice, and hanging judge Lord Fiddler put his black cap on both times, and
Guilty?
oh yeah, but you've got no chance of not being guilty.
What were the charges, though?
Well, the first one was sending scurrilous reports back to the UK, which of course you know you might as well just take. And I had to drink this horrible drink with things floating in it, and I was stark naked, stood on a rubbish bin. They just turned it upside down in front of 45 guys. And at the end, so it was always good, because I was usually the first one up, being the outsider of the group.
Yeah.
So I could get that out of the way, and then I could relax, because I knew it had been sorted.
Yeah.
But there was a private prosecution at the end. John Orwin and John Fiddler, who were both England lock forwards, so 6 foot plus, massive guys.
Yeah.
And they had to stand on this bin, but of course they had to get 1 foot each on and cuddle each other to balance, to find their balance. So they were stood there facing whatever charges they were facing, and the next person to use the room was the bingo girl, and she walked in at the back to see 45 guys looking at 2 guys stark naked on a rubbish bin cuddling each other. She screamed through everything in the air and ran. What the heck she thought it was, I don't know.
Yeah. What is going on? Yeah.
That was in Florida.
So you obviously you've got to travel a lot through your work.
Yeah.
What's your favourite place you've been in the world?
Oh, crumbs. Oh dear. Probably crumbs. I've been obviously on holidays, etc. as well, but probably sports-wise, America and Canada with Gloucester City.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually got selected for a team.
Oh, okay.
Dave Jones selected me as well. It was against the local university team, and he didn't want his players to get involved, so. Yeah.
Gave you your.
I got a shirt. Yeah.
So I'm assuming, like, as a regional journalist, like you say, even with the court system there and stuff like that, like, you are very close to the squads, particularly when they're travelling, going on tour like that. You are.
Yeah. I travelled with the team.
Yeah. So, like, what are some of the sort of more interesting tour stories that you can remember, in terms of maybe what people haven't heard and things like that?
Crumbs. When we were in Spain, Michael Chopra and some of his friends tipped my room upside down while I was out for a walk. Stupidly, a rookie error, I went for a walk and they could see me where I was. So they went down to reception, said, can we have the key for whatever? And they went in, they tipped everything. It was brilliant because they didn't damage anything, but they tipped everything upside down. They cut the bristles off my toothbrush and then wrote in toothpaste, "Guess who?" on the bathroom mirror. And so that was when Chops was. Did he go to Sunderland? He was just about to leave the club anyway.
So he was on his way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have spoken to him about it, and he had a laugh.
Yeah, they that group though, actually, which Dave Jones put together, sort of with Jay Bothroyd and Chops and Kev and all these people, like they did party hard from speaking to the guys, but also they were excellent on the pitch, and I think in some ways they came so close, didn't they? To achieving it, and it was. You look back at that playoff final and Jay Bothroyd limping off, and we had me and Kev had Jay on the podcast, and it's one of his like his biggest regrets and his biggest sort of He looks back on it, and I think that's
That was the game against Blackpool you're talking.
Yeah. And that's how Cardiff fans feel. Like they just think Jay was so difficult to play against when he was on it, and I think he's another one. Mind, he's complex dude, isn't he?
Oh yes, yeah.
But Dave Jones was the only person who ever got a real tune out of him.
Yeah.
Which is
What I didn't understand that day was why Dave didn't throw Josh McGuinness in, the former goalkeeper, because in the league game against Blackpool, he had terrorised the Blackpool centre-backs just by running out and his aggression and his charge. And they sent on a Tuhu, didn't they?
Yeah.
Kelvin Tuhu. And it was completely the opposite and never really made an impact. And I just thought McGuinness might have shaken them up a bit.
Yeah, especially because
easy to say afterwards, obviously.
Of course. I think like Jay Bofford was so unplayable at times that season. You could see when he went off, it deflated everyone, deflated the players, and it was a big blow. It's one of them where you look back on it. But even, you know, the one I look back as a Cardiff fan the most is the FA Cup final versus Portsmouth, because I felt like they were really, I thought that was our day, and I thought like Portsmouth were there for the taking. I thought we could have beaten them, and I remember, wasn't it when Ramsey was on the bench, and so even as the kickoff sort of came around, there was a bit of like not a deflation as such, but everyone was a bit like, oh, why
Didn't
is
Rambo made his debut that season, didn't he? At Chasetown.
That's right, yeah.
In the first round, possibly, I don't know.
Yeah, it was certainly in the early rounds, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I mean, he was so highly rated at that age that like everyone was hoping he was going to start, and I think, it was I hated that day. It was awful. We stayed.
Particularly as it was a goalkeeping error, and I like the goalie
Enkelman,
but he just made a mistake, and then Carnu scored.
Yeah, I think for some reason I find that one more painful than the Liverpool one, because the Liverpool one never expected to get, don't expect to beat Liverpool, do you? So to take it to penalties, and Ben Turner's last minute equaliser was just phenomenal. Those experiences are the ones which you can take forever with you on. Like I remember, when Ben Turner scored, I was still in a wheelchair at that point from after my accident. So me and my wife were in sort of the disabled section, but I was able to get out with my wheelchair. I just couldn't walk very far at all. But of course, Ben Turner scored, and I'm like sort of trying to get her, and she's pushing me down, and I'm going nuts, and the steward's going, "What's going on?" But it was they were great days. And look, let's talk about Dave Jones. I'm assuming if he picked you for the team when you were on that tour, I'm assuming that at that point your relationship was pretty good.
We had a terrific relationship for a long time. I even went up his house, and he changed when he fell out with a colleague of mine, Mark Bloom. They used to meet again for chats, etc., and I don't quite know what happened. But I walked into the training ground one day, and they were Dave was having the words. He was saying a few things, going over the top, and I said, what's the matter? What's going on? And after that, he changed. He wouldn't speak to any of us. So, and his press officer for the club told him, he said, look, you've got to keep somewhere open to talk to the newspaper. You can't just ignore them. But he said, no, that's it, done. I mean, when we were in America, he was knocking on my door saying, have you got any films I can watch and things?
He's another one. We're talking about complex characters, I think. I know, obviously, Kev McNaughton well, and he speaks so highly of him. He's so grateful to him. Brig brought him over from Scotland, and he gave him a great run all the way into and went on and played for Cardiff in the Premier League, and played for Scotland, and was a phenomenal servant for Cardiff as well. And obviously, and Jay as well says, Jay cannot speak highly enough of Dave Jones, because he was the one.
He's a good manager. Good manager.
But for some reason, but then the other side of that is, of course, Andy Campbell, who, off the back of the playoff goal and actually finding a bit of form for Cardiff, suddenly found himself on the outskirts and training with the reserves for no. I think, from speaking to Andy, that's the thing which hurt him. I think was not playing. Like, obviously he wanted to play, but you could accept not being selected. I think it's being banished to train with kids for when you haven't, like, if there hasn't been a proper disciplinary issue. But yeah, I think Dave Jones probably falls into that complex character.
Yeah, he is complex. I had one or two fallings out with him, and one of which was at the Pontypridd Town Football Club centenary dinner, at which he was speaker, and he did his, and then he did a Q&A, and a friend of mine who was with me at the time, Lee Beams, he was sitting next to me, it was a black tie do and everything, suddenly piped up with, Dave, why won't you speak to the journalists at the South Wales Echo? So Dave looked at me and said, oh, it's down to you, and I didn't have a clue he was going to ask that question. And he started having a go about whatever. And I said, look, Dave, I'll come and see you afterwards, but it's not the time. This is the Pontypridd Town do. So after all, I went up to a table and just said, come on then, let's have it out. And but he was a complex character, lovely guy in many ways, lovely family, but at times he could be a little bit awkward.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because you're right. You as a manager of a championship club or any football club really, you need to have contact with the local media, particularly.
In some way, shape, or form, yes. Yeah.
You have to have something, don't you? And I think if you just sort of banish everyone, because there was a point where some people were banned, weren't they? From like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you in that category?
No.
Never been banned.
I have been banned. Yeah, I was banned from.
Who banned you?
Maidstone United. Was banned briefly at Cardiff City. I can't remember who it was now. Probably Sam. A man.
Another interesting time.
I still speak to him. A lot of us do. He rings up from the Lebanon every now and again and just has a natter.
Crazy.
He's mad about Cardiff City.
It's sad, in so many ways. It's sad how it's sort of it's ended, if you like, with Sam Man, because he did so much for Cardiff, and I think in many ways he's responsible for getting the fans back in the stadium.
Yes. Yeah.
And up until recently, I think, the fans were there week in, week out, and it was pretty full. And I think he was a big part of getting people involved. Like, for me, that era was an era where it really pushed me from being someone who went now and again, just, if my friends are going, I'll go. And so you'd go maybe every few weeks or whatever. And that era pushed me from that to getting a season ticket and to going every week and travelling about. And I think you deserve credit for that, because those people then who were my age, sort of, I don't know, 18 to 20 or whatever it was, like, they're the ones who still go now and they take their kids and it's the next generation. And I do, when I see the empty stands over the last couple of years, sometimes I do think it's worrying, more worrying in some ways than the football hasn't been great at times and stuff like that. I worry more about the empty stands, because I think if you've got empty stands, where's the next generation going to be?
Yes.
And then it gets smaller, doesn't it, with each generation, because there's less people going. But I don't know. It's an interesting one. What's your favourite time of covering Cardiff as a club?
Oh, crumbs. Sam was fun. He could be a funny guy, playing tricks on players, and he used to pay people to let their tyres down at the training ground and things. And when he put sheep in Alan Cork's office and shut the door, which, there were just stupid things he did, but it got people laughing. But again, he didn't always get it right. There is no question he's passionate about Cardiff City. He wouldn't be still ringing people up and talking to them.
No.
Because when I first started reporting on Cardiff City, the first game, it must have been a bit of unease around the club, and the directors heard there was going to be a protest, so they didn't turn up. So this protest came up. There was about 20 guys came running up into the director's box at Ninian Park. Nobody there, so they came up to the press box and started having a go at me, even though I'd only just started covering the club. The security came rushing up, and I said, no, let's leave it. So I agreed to meet the guys the next day in Lee Beams' cafe, the 1927 cafe. And I've been friends with a lot of those guys ever since, because I sat there and discussed it with them, and they may not always agree with me, but
No. It's boring if everyone agrees, anyway,
yes.
Isn't it? Also, I was trying to think then. I was just thinking then, like, what owners do I remember sort of as a kid? And I think Rick Wright
Yes.
and I forget his name. I think it's Kumar.
Samish Kumar.
That's it. Yeah. I think they're the first sort of ones that I've got a memory of as a kid, sort of being the owners.
Rick Wright came across quite well. I didn't ever meet him, but he from what I've read about him, he seemed a decent enough guy. Who followed on after that? It must have been Samish, was it, straight after?
Yeah, I think so.
Because he bought it, the rumour has it anyway, that he bought it, he borrowed some money to buy it for something like £800,000, the club, and then appointed himself into a position and paid himself enough to pay back the loan. So he didn't actually...
Yeah, just didn't pay for the
It
club.
was quite
really.
legal, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that was
Got the
the
club
rumour.
for free, effectively. Well,
And yeah,
good work if you can get it.
yes, yeah. But Steve Borley, of course, was running it for a while,
Yes.
and he was
Another tremendous servant for
Oh.
who doesn't get enough
But
credit.
he used to put his hand in his pocket to pay bills and
Keep the club afloat.
yeah.
I think I often, when I see people on social media, and I try to spend as little time as possible on there these days, but over the years, and I see people sort of having a go at Steve, and I really, it leaves a real bitter taste in my mouth, because I just think club wouldn't even be there without him.
He
and
did
it's
his
just-
best. He did, and he's still doing his best.
Yes, absolutely. But like,
You know.
it's like people got short memories, I think, sometimes, haven't
Yes,
they, in
yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
what people have.
I just wish Vincent Tan and Sam could have somehow found a way to work together. I'm not ever going to say they would have been best friends, but for the sake of the club, because I think together they might have got somewhere. Because he was going to be president, wasn't he? And
Yeah, for a way it looked like he was going to have some sort of role for a while, wasn't
yeah.
it? What was I know we're jumping around a little bit, but it's the way it is. I do like it, just jumping around. The rebrand obviously was a massive story in Cardiff,
Yes.
particularly, but I think nationally as well, but particularly obviously in Cardiff and the surrounding areas. I've barely been back since, I've got to be honest. That it killed me. It really damaged the way I sort of viewed football overall, but particularly like it didn't feel like my club as much as like, and I forced myself to go to a couple of games in the Premier League season, and I just wasn't the same. And look, I have been back. I took my youngest son a couple of times because he wanted to go. Not going to stop him.
no.
But yeah, it's been difficult. But for me, like once I stopped for like a year, I sort of stopped and I said, I'll go back when they get rid of that god awful kit. And then by the time they got rid of the red kit and went back to the blue, my habits had changed on a Saturday.
Yes.
Suddenly my wife was like, "Oh, you're around now, are you?"
Yeah, it was a bad decision, but Vincent Tan genuinely thought it was a good thing from his perspective. I'm not saying the clubs. He genuinely, in his own mind, thought it's a lucky, red is lucky, etc. But I think the people around him at the club, who knew the background to the club and the history, should have just said, "Don't be so stupid."
Yeah.
But of course, when you're dealing with your boss, who's from another country, you're a bit, and maybe they did, I don't know, but somebody, I actually sat and talked to him once. I did a video interview with Vincent Tan, and this came after and I tried to explain to him, I said, look, I'll hold my hands up, say I'm a lifelong Spurs fan, which I never said while I was covering Cardiff. But I said to him, look, Vincent, if you bought Tottenham Hotspur Football Club and you suddenly decided Spurs were going to play in green and white hoops, I said, the fans would go absolutely berserk. And it's the same here. It's not a red club. It's not.
Yes.
And he didn't, maybe he did grasp it in the end because they went back, but...
But do you think they went back through a business decision as opposed to going back on the decision because...
I think he realised that he didn't know a lot about football. He does now, a lot more anyway. But at the time he didn't. He was coming into something new. He made a mistake.
Everyone does it.
And everybody does. It's not.
It was just a cost.
He didn't mean any harm by it as such. He thought it was a good thing. Unfortunately, the fans didn't.
Yeah, it was when it first got announced. It was weird because I remember the first initial sort of announcement or rumours of it. It was like everyone was like, "Oh, it can't be true. No, it can't be true." But of course, years earlier, there'd been rumours that Sam Mann had wanted to do something similar.
Oh yeah, with the badge
And he had the badge as well, and stuff like that. So
they used to play in chocolate and blue, didn't they, in the old days?
God, yeah, that's going back a long time. But like, I just think, and then the rumours sort of swirled, and everyone was like, "Oh, it can't be true, it can't be true." And then it was like, "Oh, the club." I think the clubs saw the reaction and said, "Oh no, it's not going to happen." And then a portion of people started to say, "Well, no, we need the money." And I think, from what I can remember, my memory's not always the best. I think there was something like, if they changed the colour, there was going to be this £100 million investment, and if they didn't change the colour and rebrand, then they weren't going to get this investment. And to me, I only speak for myself, to me, that felt like almost like emotional blackmail, and it just didn't sit right. And I think, obviously, that was such a difficult period. And like, I asked some of the players who I know about it, and they're all, even now, they don't want to touch it really. They'll kind of, say a little bit but not much, and they'll maybe say a lot without saying anything, if you know what I mean. It's like they don't want to touch it, and I get, I understand, but I think it says how emotive the subject is, that those players still, even years later when it's and then retired, and they still don't want to talk about it.
It's Vincent Tanner's done an awful lot of good for the club as well. He's put a lot of his own money into the club, and when you think about it, they're still in the second tier. They've been up to the Premier League twice.
Yeah.
So it's not all doom and gloom by any means. And he has learned a lot. He has, and he's the club is on a decent basis. So,
2 questions then. The first question is, do you think his time is coming to an end at Cardiff?
That is purely down to him. We can't say that because it would obviously take somebody to come in and buy the club. He would need to be at ease with that. It may be that he's fallen in love with football. I don't know. He's bought several clubs, hasn't he, around the place?
Yeah.
And he when his club in Belgium, maybe, they were about to win the league anyway, and I was about to go on holiday. I was in Heathrow Airport with my wife, sitting waiting in departures, and the chief exec rang and said, "Oh, Terry, Vincent's going to whichever club it was." He said, "If they win today, they're going to win the league and etc." He said, "We'd like you to come with us." And I said, "Well, I can't. I'm just going to America on holiday." And they said, "Well, no, we'll pick you up." He said, "We'll drop into Heathrow and pick you up." I said, "Well, how does that work?" But I couldn't have walked off and said to my wife, "I'm going to Belgium now."
See that,
So we went to America, but he's put a lot of money into football.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. You can't, and that's the one thing you can't deny, that I think, he has invested a hell of a lot into the club, and it's difficult. I get it, and I know, like, it's emotional and stuff like that, and you can't deny that. I think he's done a lot of good, and he's probably kept us going in many ways.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But,
you got the training ground is fantastic.
Yeah.
I used to train in the park across the road at one stage at Ninian Park.
God, yeah. Jesus. What about Peter Risdale?
I got on really well with Peter, and he again is a complex character. He was always open with me. I could ring him up and ask. Even now, I can ring him up and say, "Do you know anything about this or anything?" I mean, I don't now because I'm not working as a journalist, but he would always do his best to find out. He'd say, "I'll ring so and so and find out." So, yeah, he like everybody made mistakes.
He got a lot of the blame, I think, didn't
Yes.
he, when things went sour with
The Leeds thing
everything, and
came with him, didn't it, as baggage. And when things didn't go quite right, people jumped on him, and But again, I mean, would the stadium have been built
without him?
without him? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that because it was
Definitely did a lot towards it, didn't he?
yes. Yeah.
That's an interesting one, that is.
I missed Ninian Park though, but
Yeah, I did too. I've never quite felt the same about the Cardiff City Stadium. as I do, or as I did for Ninian Park. I just didn't quite have the same relationship. Although, I will say, since the Wales games have been there,
Yeah.
I think that has definitely improved things a little bit. On the subject of Wales, you would have covered a few different regimes
Yes,
under
yeah.
well, were you there for the Bobby Gould?
Yes, yeah.
Wow, that was an interesting one.
Bobby was, yes, and crumbs. They had some interesting characters at Cardiff City and around, because he was at Cardiff obviously as well.
Yes,
for,
yeah.
And I can remember before, when Sam was coming in to take over the club, Cardiff City went to Ireland on pre-season tour, and we were at a place called Longford, maybe, and Sam had sent Bobby Gould over to spy on the team, or not spy, just watch the team, see what it was going to report back. And he was hiding in the trees. It was an open sort of ground. He was hiding in the trees, trying to peer out. And the fans were walking past him saying, "Hey, Bobby, hey, Bobby." He was trying to hide. And it wasn't long after that it all came in and Sam took over, and I think Bobby became manager not long after that, did he?
No.
And then on to Wales, etc. But yes.
Vinnie Jones as captain.
Vinnie Jones, yes, as a player. To be fair, he made the most of his ability. You know, he put himself about.
Yeah, it was. It's just a weird thing, wasn't it, to see Vinnie Jones in a Wales shirt, because I don't think anyone thought that he felt remotely like any allegiance to Wales. He's the most Cockney guy possible, isn't he? And it was a strange time for Welsh football. What about what's been the most difficult story that you've ever had to cover?
Oh, crumbs. Been a few of those. That's a tough one. There was times when there were financial irregularities being claimed, and I got a lot of calls from people outside the club saying, "Oh yeah, this is happening, and they were claiming to be agents of something or other." And I've met loads of them. I even took Peter Ridsdale down in the end to meet up with them, but nothing ever came of that, and I don't know what it was all about in the end. But that was a tough one because I couldn't work out what was there and what wasn't there. It was a difficult one. Crumbs. It's always difficult when managers are moved on. I felt for Alan Cork when he, on the way back from Wigan, when he lost 4-0, didn't they? That was a tough one.
I suppose you build quite particularly before, I would imagine, before the internet and things come along, I'd imagine you build quite a rapport and a relationship with these guys, the managers and the assistants or whatever, coaches and players. So I guess when they get moved on, particularly if they get sacked or if they get, a bit unceremoniously ousted, it must be quite difficult because you've still got to cover it.
Yes. Oh yeah.
But
absolutely.
you're also covering someone who potentially could be a friend or.
Yeah, most of them know football and know that it's going to be reported on. And you can't do anything about it.
No.
And of course, if you've got their trust, they'll talk to you about, if they can, about what's gone on. And yes, there've been many stories about Cardiff City over the years.
In your career covering football, who took criticism the worst, do you think?
Oh, crumbs.
Put you on the spot a little bit.
No, when McKay first took over, and he's not one of these, but it was a moment. The first press conference he did, he went through it all, and he, at the end of it, he said, "Terry, can you come into my office for a moment?" And I went in, and he said, "Where do you get that story?" I'd splashed on Kenny Miller joining Cardiff, and he said, "Where do you get that story from?" I said, "Well, I can't tell you that." Okay, I said, "What's the matter with it?" He said, He swore at me. He said, "It's true. That's what's wrong with it." I said, "Well, you can't really criticise me for writing something that's true." And he said, "Right, why did this happen?" And I said that we'd fallen out with Dave Jones, and we used to sit in the office, which we did, and say, "Oh, crumbs, should we use that?" Oh, he won't speak to us anyway, so we'll just use it. As long as it was true.
Of course, yeah.
Which this was. And Malky said, "Look, just ring me if you want any background. He said, I won't try and stop using it, but at least I'll know what's going on, if what's going to go in the paper, etc.
Yeah.
So, which, you know, Lenny Lawrence was another good one.
Yes.
He was excellent. I used to ring him every morning as he came across Severn Bridge, and he'd go through. And when they signed, who was the Australian Tony Vidmar?
Yeah.
Yeah. When they signed him, I was down at Cardiff Central. And I saw this guy stroll in who looked like a footballer, and there was a guy with him who looked like an agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I followed them outside. They jumped in a taxi, and I can't remember if I. But anyway, they headed off towards Cardiff, Ninian Park at the time. So I rang Lenny and I said, "Do you sign in somebody, Lenny?" He said, "Why?" I said, "I've just seen him come get off the train at Cardiff," completely going for it. I didn't know. He said, "Oh my God!" He said, "I'll ring you back as soon as I've spoken to him." But he was very good, Lenny.
Yeah.
Very good.
Marky McKay is an interesting one for me because I think universally loved by the fans. We're never in the relegation zone in the Premier League,
No.
and then obviously was gone in what seemed like overnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if you read like message boards and stuff like that, you kind of knew there was something brewing in the weeks before. But ultimately, if you just followed it in the news and the papers, it was a pretty overnight thing. You've mentioned a couple of times that he was quite good to deal with. How was that time at the club to come? It must have been strange because, like I said, we weren't in the relegation zone, and whilst we weren't tearing up trees,
Only just above, yeah.
but we were sort of starting to maybe get a couple of draws and wins, and it looked like, not that we were safe by any means, but we at least were putting up a fight to stay up. And the thing which always interests me with Malky is the fans love him, but the season we won the championship under him, the football was not very nice, not very good to watch.
No.
It was a lot of 1-0s and 2-1s and you know, last minute goals or like low scoring games.
Yeah.
It was very practical football.
Yeah.
But because we just kept winning and we were top of the league, which was unheard of really,
Yeah,
we were never we were always kind of going for the playoffs, weren't we, rather than sort of at the top. The momentum kept going, didn't it? And it does interest me though, because it wasn't the most enjoyable football to watch, which are normally they're the managers where the fans they'll go with it when it's going well, but once it starts going badly, it will go quickly because the football's not enjoyable. And we've seen that with other managers since, certainly in recent times. But yeah, the Premier League, he was never in the relegation zone, and then obviously was sacked. It was a bit of a strange time, I think.
Yeah. With all the stuff that was going on outside of the football, there were so many rumours and about what had been texted to who or texted back or whatever. He got a couple of things wrong. He's paid too much for Cornelius.
Who's actually gone on and scored a lot of goals since.
Yeah, well, he was a youngster then, and I think I did speak to Malky about that, and he said that he was set to buy him for something like 5 or 6 or something like that, and other clubs came in for Cornelius, so it built up, and Malky decided to stick with it. Unfortunately, it didn't work for him, and I don't think he didn't play that often. I think he got a bit of a knock. So he got things wrong, but they were exciting times because he brought in good players, didn't he? I mean, some reasonable players. And
there was what's his name? Kimbo. I used to love him.
Yes.
I thought he was I always had high hopes for him, and I don't actually know. I thought, I generally will keep an eye on a player after they go from Cardiff, and like obviously Cornelius has gone on and Danish international doing very well. I'm gonna have to have a look at that later. That's gonna bug me. But I'd be interested to know, because I remember when he scores that equaliser against Man United in the home game. The place that just erupted. Everybody loved him. He was kind of like that. I don't think quite on the level of like an Eddie Johnson, but he was going in that direction. I think because he worked hard and he had a bit about him.
He hadn't matured though at the time, had he?
No, he was young as well, wasn't he? And this is it. It's a lot of those players
physically. I meant they.
But I mean, I think he was like early 20s, wasn't he? And I think Cornelius was young, and there was a couple of others. We had some experience, but some of the players that he brought in were actually probably would have needed
Yeah.
a year or two maybe just to bed in and get going. And I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? Because ultimately it's a business where you don't get time.
No.
And that point in time, even though it was a while ago, I think that was the beginning of managers getting much less time to build
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Like these days, if you don't get off to a good start as a manager,
No.
you're in trouble within 6 games. I mean, we've seen a few managers in the last couple of years go within sort of 3-6 months in some cases.
Yeah.
So, like, how difficult is it when the story? So with Malky didn't really get sacked for footballing reasons. Obviously, it was more to do with the text messages and the things like this. Like, how difficult is that in terms of covering it? Because obviously, I'm assuming you would have contacted like Malky and the others involved. Like, is that tricky to navigate?
Not
Just from a humane point of view, I guess.
It is in a way, but there are people that are easy to approach and people who aren't. So, and Malky was, I think there were only a couple of texts attributed to him, weren't there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was towards
was,
Ian. Was it Ian?
Yes, yeah.
Ian.
The difference was that Ian had a club phone, apparently.
Ah, I see.
Malky had his own phone. So while they could look through Ian's,
Yes.
I felt for Malky in the end because he went a long time struggling to find jobs. He went to Wigan, didn't he, for a little while. Now he's with Ross County, I think.
I think he's doing quite well with them, though,
Yeah,
isn't he?
yeah.
And look, I thought, regardless of how it kind of went, sort of a bit sour or whatever in the end, they've done a tremendous job for Cardiff City. And I think most fans, if you asked fans, like, who's their favourite manager in the last 15, 20 years, most of them would say Marky McKay.
Yeah.
I think Dave Jones would be up there as well.
Yes, yeah.
Because Dave Jones, the football we played under Dave Jones, I think was exquisite, and he had a habit of getting people like Jay Bothroyd and Chopra and players who maybe were not on their necessarily. I don't think Chopra, for instance, was on his last chance in terms of football, but I think he'd had a few issues and he got the best out of him. Who do you think is the most sort of how can I phrase this? The troubled player, or not troubled as in problems. I mean, like can't stay out of trouble in terms of nights out and just things like that over the years. Because I know there's been a lot of those over the years with Cardiff.
The one
especially pre-internet.
Leon Jean was the one.
Yes.
Now,
unfortunately,
he was technically magnificent. He had such skill. I saw him in a reserve game. He was forced into the corner, up to the corner flag, and he had a player either side of him. And somehow he turned with the ball, went past them, and they were still looking at the corner flag. How he did that, I don't know. And at half time, the opposing manager took off both his wide men because Leon was just running amok. But he lost his way.
he was living with Gilo for a while, wasn't he? Was it Gilo?
I don't know.
I'm sure he was living.
I was there when he was selected to play against QPR away by Alan Cork, and he got his mates round to the team hotel stupidly and was wandering around the hotel, and Corky found him and said, look, go to bed, rest. He said, if you don't sleep, but rest your legs. Half an hour later he was still wandering around with his mates, and Corky said, you dropped. And he came to the press box with me and he cried. I said, Leon, you got to be professional about it. You got to.
Yeah.
And he just let himself down. I mean, he was a lovely kid, such a great lad, but he just lost his way too often. And that was the time when Sam put the sheep's testicles clause in Spencer Pryor's contract, and it was Spencer and Leon went down to the valleys, and Sam supposedly served up pita bread and sheep's testicles. And I went round to the kitchen. I said, he said, no, it's chicken. And everybody was going, oh.
Struggling to eat it. And it was just chicken. Yeah, everyone I spoke, every single player which I've interviewed or spoken to, or we had on with me and Andy, they all say the same thing about Leon Jean. He's technically the best footballer they've ever seen. But he just for whatever reason couldn't get it together. And I think in fairness to the club, they tried everything with him. They tried.
They put him into a rehab place, didn't they? And
Yeah, I think he went to rehab. I'm sure, I'm 90% sure that at one point Gilo said he said he was living with him for a little bit, just to try and sort of almost not babysit him, but you know, just keep an eye on him and keep him out of trouble. And just one of them.
I used to be quite close to his uncle.
Yeah.
Who's unfortunately passed away now, but he did his best for Leon, and he had a real chance, that kid, but unfortunately he let it slip through his grasp.
Yeah, he's not the first and won't be the last either.
Of course, Phil Mulrine had a reputation of
liking a bit of a drink, didn't he?
Liking a bit of a drink, but he's now in religion, isn't he?
Is he?
He's become a Catholic priest.
Wow.
So
funny world.
Yes, yeah.
Who else was there? Leighton Maxwell, I think, was prone to a few nights out, but I think I think he's in prison. Isn't he?
I don't know.
I think
didn't
he
know
is.
that.
I think he is. If he's not, I'll take that out. But I'm pretty sure he is.
I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure he is. I would say, but
he told me off once because I called him a bustling midfield player.
Did he?
He said, "I don't bustle."
I've heard he's a really nice guy.
He is.
He's
yes,
really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he.
He used to live with Alan Lee. They used to share a house.
Oh, Alan Lee. I used to love Alan Lee.
Yeah.
Peter Thorne was my favourite player when I was younger.
Oh, what a good guy that guy is as well. So
Absolute
nice.
Legend.
Him and Ernie together.
Just the dream team, weren't they?
Yes. Recently, Matthew Myers, who plays for Cardiff Devils ice hockey, had his testimonial, and the club were going to send a player to. They were doing a question of sport or something, so they were going to have a player from the rugby club, ice hockey, football, and cricket. And something happened. I think it might have been the plane crash, and so the club decided nobody can go to it. You know, that was the circumstances. So I rang up Robert Earnshaw and said, "Look, Ernie, can you help out with this?" And he went for it straight away, and just represented the club because he wasn't at the club anymore. He could go and do it. So yeah, he's a lovely kid.
Yeah, there's been a few over the years, haven't there?
I've done a few specials on Robert Earnshaw, mine with the pull-out 16-page
God,
things.
I was going to say, I've got a few of those up in my loft, I reckon. From over the years. The only things I bloody keep hold of is the South Wales Echo, like the pull-outs and stuff after the playoffs and the rest of it. How has journalism and newspapers specifically, but journalism generally changed?
Oh, dramatically.
Because of the internet. Because like you touched on at the start, you know, back in the day, certainly when I was growing up, newspapers was where you got your news.
Yes.
And then the news in the night, you know, news at 10 or whatever. Like, obviously, that was your bread and butter, is the newspapers. South Wales Echo became, and the Western Mail obviously would have grown and became the Wales Online and things like this. And it's, you know, it's the same all around the country with these sort of regional newspapers turn into the various online things. Like, how did that affect the profession overall, but also like you personally?
Didn't really affect me because I was getting out as a, you know, now it's changed completely. If you notice, a lot of the internet news outlets quote journalists on stories, so they're saying journalist somebody or other reckons this might happen.
I think Wales Online quote me and Cullen of Central Club a lot of the time. They seem to get a lot of their stories from the podcasts we have. When I had Mehmet Dalman on, I think it was the second time Mehmet might be the second. So he's been on 3 times, I think, 2 or 3. But the second time he came on, Wales Online used it was like a week of every day a different article from the podcast. And I was like,
that's just part of the course.
yeah, of course
They're bound to do that.
But it was new to me because the first time we'd had him on, Paul
Abandonado.
Yeah. Me and him had a little, not an argument, we'd had words on Twitter because he had published a story which was very clearly taken directly from the conversation that had been live the night
Yeah,
before,
yeah.
but he hadn't mentioned anything about it. And loads of people had been like tweeting me and tweeting him.
Ideally, you should have told.
Yeah, just anything, innit? Just
Yeah.
acknowledgement. But like, and I didn't even really think of it at that point because I was very naive to it. But loads of people had sort of tagged me and tagged him, and they were sort of saying, you know, oh, you should have said where you got it from, blah blah blah. And I had said, yeah, it would have been nice. I didn't even, you know, say anything particularly aggressive. It was just like, it would have been nice to be credited or something like that. And yeah, he sort of said, oh, I don't know. I phoned him this morning and blah 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 blah. And I was just like, oh, right.
Phone who?
Mehmet Darman. So
He probably did,
Yeah,
because
he-
Mehmet
he
is
did.
available.
Oh
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I mean, still shocks me that I'm able to like send him a text and whatnot, but that he's that accessible. But I know listen, a lot of my viewers who are Cardiff fans will love me for saying this, but me personally, I would not have a bad word to say about Mehmet Alman. Every time I've interacted with him, every time I've spoken to him, he's been nothing but a gentleman.
Yep.
And every time I've interviewed him or had him on a podcast, I gave him the opportunity for it to be pre-recorded, and I gave him the opportunity to do it, have the questions beforehand.
Yeah.
And both times he said, "How do you normally do it?" I said, "Well, we do them live. That's how we kind of
Yeah,
do it. We
yeah.
have footballers on live, so
Yeah.
people can ask them questions." And he said, "Right, well, that's what we'll do." And I said, "Is there anything you don't want me to ask?" "No, ask me anything. If I don't want to answer it, I'll
Yeah.
skirt around it." And I had so much respect for him for that, because I dealt with people I had a cricketer, who I won't name still, who asked me for nearly $3,000 for a 30-minute Zoom call in the pandemic. And I was just like, no. But you've got people on that end of the spectrum, and then there's other people who will be nothing but polite and nothing but gentlemen. And look, I'm not naive enough to think that you can get someone on, particularly if they're active in football, say, you know, when we've had current players on, something, you know, you might be able to ask them something, but they might not always be able to answer it.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can't. So, and in fairness to Mehmet Dalman, he tried his best to answer everything we asked him. And the first show we did with him was predominantly about Emiliano Sala. And look, he answered, not one question did he say, "I won't answer that," or "I can't answer that." He tried to answer everything as sort of best he could. And, you know, you could tell maybe there was one or two questions which he kind of like I said earlier, said a lot, but without saying too much. But like, you can understand that it was an ongoing thing and stuff like that. And it was the same with the second show.
Terrible, that was terrible.
Yeah, it was awful. I mean,
for his family and the whole thing.
It just seems so senseless to me. Like, in terms of, it seems wholly avoidable.
Yes.
But
we don't know the ins and outs of it all.
Yeah, no, we don't. I will say that I certainly think that everyone is obviously the David Ibbotson, who obviously was prosecuted, and is it David Ibbotson? The pilot, not the pilot.
The pilot wasn't found, I don't think, was it?
No, it's the pilot who was the person who sorted out the flights and stuff, was sort of prosecuted and whatever. I still stand by, like, the agent the agent and his son had a massive part to play in putting all that together, and I just don't understand why that's never been more of a story in terms of the questions which people are asking. I had Harry Harris, who's a journalist up in
I know Harry.
and I've had him on a couple of times, and we've he's been on. We did a few shows because he's done a tremendous job in sort of investigating everything around the flight and the ins and outs of it. Really thorough journalist, and like, it's funny how I got into contact with him. So when the book originally came out that he wrote about the Emiliano Sala sort of tragedy and everything, I saw that this book was coming out, and I was like, oh, I would like to speak to the person who's written that, and I was like, I can't find this Harry Harris person anywhere. And then there was this Twitter handle. It was like quite a small account, didn't have loads of followers, didn't have anything like, you know, Telegraph and all these different places he's written for. Just, it was called Footy Legends or something like that. But all they seemed to be doing was tweeting this book. So I sent them a DM just on the off chance. I said, do you know who wrote this book? And he was very sort of shadowy, and he just went, why do you want to know? And I was just like, oh, I just want to interview you. And then I messaged him on LinkedIn then. But like, he's a lovely chap, and he, again, another like yourself, who's just interviewed all these incredible names, football around the world. I think he wrote a book on Pele fairly recently as well. Been around the block. He's a Spurs fan as well, funny enough. But as a Spurs fan, do you think Harry Kane will still be there next year?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes.
Interesting.
I said that all last summer as well, whenever we said, oh, he's going here, he's going there. Part of that depends on who they appoint as manager.
I think, so I said to Rodri, I think 2 weeks ago, because I'm not a massive Conte fan, and I was quite critical of Rodri in the summer because he was said that he thought if United couldn't get Ten Hag, they should go for Conte, and I said no, Conte's the last person they need because he might win you something, but he's very similar to Mourinho. He needs a lot of money, and he's in and out, and football's not great, and I don't think that's what United need. United need to build something. But I said to Rodri a couple of weeks ago, I wouldn't be surprised if Tottenham get Pochettino back in, because I think he's probably the one person who might keep Harry Kane there. But I don't know, Harry Kane, he's 29, 30. To me, I think it's now or never.
I agree with that.
If he doesn't go this year, then I think he'll probably stay there for the rest of his career.
For the rest of his career, yes. Yeah, I agree.
And I also would say that with United needing that striker now, I think it's where he's got a decision to make, hasn't he? Is do I go to United and bet on their project, which is obviously looking pretty good at the moment, or I suppose there's like Bayern and a few clubs around Europe, but
that's incredible, that sacking that Julian Nagelsmann, because they're second in the league, they're still in the European Champions League and have won every game, and and they're in the cup as well.
Did you hear why he got sacked?
I didn't know.
So apparently he got sacked because he started a relationship with a female journalist out in Germany, which is, I mean, so the story which I read was that, you know, obviously he'd started this relationship with her, fine, but some people within the club had lost trust in him. But I was like, I'm not, like, is he gonna, I don't know, I didn't really see the correlation between it at all, especially, you know, if they were struggling, you know, they were fourth and they were out of the Champions League and there were stories galore. You'd think, all right, there's a leak in the dressing room. The manager's not doing a great job, and he's got this new relationship. But it just, it's a bit baffling one. He might end up at Spurs, man. Nagelsmann.
Absolutely. It'd be him or Pochettino, I would think. I don't know. Conte's had a difficult season, mind you. He lost 3 people close to him, and they all died.
Yes,
and it just hasn't gone for him, has it? It's just.
I just didn't. That little meltdown he had a couple of weeks ago, I didn't really. I thought it was a bit. What's the word I'm looking for? I thought it was a bit of a performance rather than genuine. Like a genuine loss of temper. Like it felt premeditated to me.
It would have been, yeah.
Especially because, like, pleading kind of poverty when he's spent the amount of money that he had just, like, he bought a lot of players in this year. A lot of good players as well. Some of them worked, some of them haven't. But I just, it felt very disingenuous to me. And I don't know.
But he brought in that Bissouma from Brighton, and each wouldn't fit into the system he wanted to play.
No.
Not when you got Højbjerg in there as well. You know, so hopefully somebody else will come and get the best out of them.
But you know, I think managers these days, compared to back in the day, certainly. Like when I was younger, if I was playing for an academy or a team or a school or whatever, like, or even when I was a man and I was playing football, like, if you had a new manager come in, they would have a look at the players you've got, a couple of training sessions, and then they would pick their team and their formation from those players that you've got and what works best for those players. But I feel like professional managers did that a lot in generally especially when they first came in, you go with what you've got and you do what's best for that group, and then maybe in the summer or transfer windows you bring people in,
tweak it,
and try and play your sort of style. But these days, like the new manager will come in, first game you'll see him with his if he prefers 3-5-2 or something, and he's straight in first game 3-5-2, and then you've got all these players like square pegs in round holes, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because every manager's got a different idea, and if you're a club like say Chelsea, who changes your manager every year, and who signs every time there's a player up to be signed, they're trying to sign them, you could end up with like a 30-man squad and a different manager every 6 months. And
there was a story going around that I'm sure was true, that they had to put more lockers in the changing room because they've got too many players.
It's crazy. But like, I'll never I'm not Frank Lampard's biggest fan in terms of being a manager. I don't think I thought he got like the Everton job and the Chelsea job. I thought they were too big for where he was. I felt like he should have stayed at Derby and maybe but I understand, he's Chelsea through and through, and I understand him wanting to take that sort of dream job. I get it, of course I do. But I thought he was actually doing all right at Chelsea. Like, he was bringing in young players, but you could see progression, but you could also see like a future with it, if you get what I mean. But they just want everything instantly. It's something which is stemmed over from the Abramovich era, and
so all we need from Cardiff this year is to make sure they stay in the Championship, isn't it? I mean, at the moment they're not too bad, but
well, they could have done with that Rotherham game not being abandoned.
Well, that was awful. I mean,
did you see some of those videos? That,
no, I haven't seen the video.
Where they were like pushing the water back onto the pitch and stuff. It was very like, they did not seem in a rush, should we say, to get the game on whatsoever. And it's frustrating, isn't it? Because we were 1-0 up, and if we'd won that would have been a real
because they've applied to start the game again at 1-0 up, but that won't happen.
No, absolutely not. There's not in a million years will that happen.
No.
I do think that we might stay. I thought we were going to go down when we got asked the question at Christmas time, or just after Christmas, who do we think was going to go up and down out of the Championship and the Premier League? And I think I said I don't want them to, and it goes against everything. But I just felt like this was going to be our season to go down. I just felt like we've been lucky the last couple of seasons. We kind of dug out in the last portion of the season.
They've been in the second tier or top tier now since 2003, haven't they? Since the playoffs.
2003, since Andy's it's a long old time, and I just felt like last year particularly we looked like we were gone, and then we just got it together at the right time, a bit of a managerial change, and they've done that a couple of times recently. Changed the manager sort of January time, and they've just had enough to stay up, and I think eventually that luck runs out, doesn't it?
Yeah. What's your view on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when he came in?
I don't think. I think he's a lovely guy.
Yes.
And by all accounts, I know a few people who are very friendly with him, and lovely guy. But I just don't think he's a top level manager. I think he could be a good coach, like a striker coach or something like that. I just like Man United, he was way out of his depth. But even at Cardiff, I listened to some of the stories that Kev was telling before about certain things, and it just, maybe he's evolved a little bit, but since then I would like to think.
Yeah, I think the team though were building from the back, weren't they, at the time? And it was around Christmas time, I think they made the change.
Yeah,
and they were building from the back again, solid, and all of a sudden it was charge.
Yeah, went to go very direct and wingers, and
but
have been told by a few people, two separate people now. Kev was one of them, I think. That at that point there was people from the top of the club maybe suggesting that he play certain players or certain things. Have you ever heard anything along those lines?
I've heard that, but I don't know if that's true. I never heard it officially, let's put it that way. But the rumours were going around, yeah.
That's madness, isn't it?
But it happens, unfortunately, it happens a
Florentino
lot,
Perez
particularly in the Premier League, because you've got, I mean, that player that Spurs signed, DJ Spence. I mean, Conte said he didn't want him, and they still signed him. So, it's
bizarre, that is, isn't it? That's just, and that's when you get to the thing about stockpiling players, and because if you're signing players, the manager's just out and out saying, "I don't want." There's some sort of disconnect there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Some sort of problem. So when did you sort of finish with journalism on a full-time basis?
A couple of years ago. I actually took redundancy in the end, but it was they were three of us, and they wanted, because there'd been a lot of redundancies at Wales Online, unfortunately. But there were three of us, and they wanted one of us to be made redundant. 3 football journalists, and they have to present you with the terms and etc. that you're going to get. And when I saw it, I said, "Yeah, come on, then give it. I'll go." And I went in, and the editor did actually say, "No, you're not going anywhere. We can't afford to lose you." But then he called me back in and said, "Look, I can see that it suits you with, I was about to get my state pension, etc." He said, "So we'll allow it." So off I went.
How long were you
My trips with Steve Tucker were over, off to away games. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, young Stephen.
It's, what was he like to spend so much time with?
Much better writer than me. I mean, in terms of pure talent. But he used to come up with the odd phrase which was a bit outlandish, and he upset a couple of. I think once he said about Steve McPhail, that Steve McPhail went off presumably to put his DVD collection into order, and Stephen didn't like that. Glenn Lovens, he said, like a dachshund on a pogo stick. He defended like a dachshund on a pogo stick, which are great lines in the context of the story, but it upsets people at times.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely.
But he was difficult to because you had to go hundreds and hundreds of miles, just the two of us. I remember once when we were coming back from somewhere, we stopped on the way to file some copy in services, jumped back in the car. We went about another hour in towards home. He suddenly realised he'd left his laptop in the services, so we had to go back up, then back.
Dear. Was it
But we
still
got
there?
on pretty well.
Was it still there, the laptop?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. The worst one, Stephen, he was rattling his copy out, and at Reading it was, and I think he was doing Western Mail, I was doing the Echo, so he'd got to fire his copy out pretty swiftly. So I went into the press conference, then he rushed into the press conference, and Malky was up on the top. And Steve suddenly came in with a question, said, "You must feel upset, Malky." He said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you really should have won that game." And Malky said, "We did win the game." And Steve said, "No, you didn't." And Malky said, "Yes, we did." And we were nudging him, "Shut up." And he'd missed a goal. I mean, he got it sorted pretty swiftly, but it was just a moment of, which is easily done when you've got heads down and you're, and it. That happened to somebody when I used to work for the.
You don't want to start arguing with the manager, though, do you, about the score?
If you're going to argue with it, so Melky never took it.
No.
he was more, but Dave Jones would have
taken offence to it.
Yes, yeah.
Did you ever fall out with Steve on your road trips?
No, he was far too easygoing. He'd gone to acting college when he was younger and wanted to be an actor, but then had gone into journalism, and no, he was a lovely guy. 2 great kids he had. They're just so sad, but
absolutely. He's I hear a lot of people got a lot of positive things to say about him. Whenever his name sort of comes up in conversation, he's always someone who's quite people seem to remember quite fondly.
Opinionated.
Yeah.
He used to go on Radio Wales a lot and argue for all sorts.
But I think that's like this. Like rather someone give an honest opinion, which might ruffle a few feathers, than just toe the line. It's one of my least favourite things about things like Match of the Day and like this sort of stuff now. Is one of my least things about football media actually at the moment is you have either Match of the Day where they won't say anything which will upset anyone, and then you've got Talk Sport who will say anything, but it's so outlandish and stupid that you know what they're doing.
They just want a reaction.
Yeah, so there's no one just in between just doing a good job and giving decent opinions.
Yeah.
But controversially, I used to like Stan Collymore on TalkSport. But just because I felt like he did toe the line between honest opinion but not outlandish and ridiculous.
Chris Sutton's quite good.
He has his moments. I prefer him on the TV to the radio, or it might be the other way around. Like one, he's a bit more. He seems to be a bit more sort of controversial, I guess.
Yeah.
One than the other. But like TalkSport, they got like Jamie O'Hara and Gabby Bongrahor and all these people at the moment, and they quite often get like Graham Souness in because I often think Graham Souness, they just need to mention Manchester United and then just let him go. And he comes up with all sorts of rubbish, like Casemiro's a steady Eddie player and all these ridiculous things that have been said. But it is funny.
Yes.
But it's funny to me. But then I look at other people and they get so angry by it, and they're so angry they have to reply. They either have to phone up TalkSport or they have to tweet, and I guess that's what they want, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's why they're saying.
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah.
That's why people like those guys, like I just mentioned, that's why they're in the prominent positions on those.
Yes, yeah.
Stations. So, what are you doing with yourself now? Bit of this and a bit of that.
Yeah, a bit of everything. Yeah, yeah. It's I write for the Cardiff City programme. I write for the Cardiff Devils programme. And
just relax and enjoy.
I'm in the Freemasons, so
there you go.
For good or bad. No, it's good. It's a good sociable crowd, and we're going to. I think we're attending Glamorgan Wanderers versus Cross Keys Rugby this weekend.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
Sponsoring the match.
There you go. That's fine. I just saying I don't know what the weather's going to be like. It's quite sunny at the moment, but like my son's football keeps getting called off every week. It's doing anything.
And I've got a grandson as well who's playing football now, 7 years old, and he's been signed by Total Pro Football or something.
Oh yeah.
Which at 7 years old and he's been assigned to Almondsbury Town in Bristol. They live over that way, so I love watching him.
Yeah, my son, he's 14, but they've only got 3 games left. But if they win those 3 games, they will probably win the league by a point. I think. But they'll certainly get promoted in the top 2. So it's a bit tense and a bit exciting and a bit good, but I love it because my oldest boy was a goalkeeper. He's 18 now, but he was in the academy system for ages, but he didn't quite play for Cardiff and Tapswell, and you know, he as just a goalkeeper, he's good enough.
Yeah.
But he couldn't get past the nerves and the anxiety of it. Like, he got better as he got older, but he just couldn't get past it. Like, he just really just couldn't settle enough.
Yes.
But it's big. But I think in some ways, I think you mentioned about him sort of being 7. That my son he was in goals for like Cardiff's development centre or something when he was about that age, and like for probably until he was halfway through high school and he was playing for Tapswell by then, like he always felt like if he made a mistake, that meant he was never going to be a professional footballer, particularly when he was 7 or 8, and he couldn't correlate you're just in there just to get better coaching and develop, and but it's not. It's Cardiff City and it's this. And he just couldn't get past that sort of anxiety, which is tough. And I think, in hindsight now, I probably would have kept him out of that system until he was a bit older, until he was about sort of 12, 13, because the younger one, who's now 14 now, I think he was in the system for a little bit, and then after COVID he came out through choice. And I think his plan is he's got like a master plan to get back in it by the time he's 16, ready to get an apprenticeship or the equivalent. But it's a good plan. Again, it's good to have targets, is what I tell him. And I said, just remember, you're competing against about 1 million other little boys who wanna play. But he is good, man.
I never played football, of course,
No?
because I used to work every Saturday, and in those days, Saturday was when the games were played. I would have played Sunday league or local league level sort of thing, and I did for a while, but had to give it up.
I guess it's back
So I went into squash, badminton, tennis, and all those sorts.
summer sports.
Well, sports you can play in the evening.
Yeah, I suppose then everything was 3 o'clock Saturday, wasn't it?
Yes.
Like, you'd be lucky if you get a couple of games at 3 o'clock Saturday these days. Well, certainly in the Premier League, it's ridiculous. Some days there's like 2 games on at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. Terry, I really enjoyed having a good old chinwag with you. I really enjoyed having a chat.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll end up inviting you back in.
Anytime.
I'm sure you've got more stories to tell as well. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me.
No
Cheers.
problem at all. Enjoyed being
Thank
there.
you. Guys, as always, thank you for watching, listening, downloading, whatever you do. Thank you. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and all that good stuff. And please do check out the sponsors. Violent Money for your MMA apparel and training and stuff. Use the code Ace Nation. Sigmatic coffee. Use the code Ace Nation. And it's just those 2 at the moment. So there we go. Thank you very much. And see you next week.